work done. I am more focused on productivity than power. I have always dedicated myself to serving the people. I have always devoted myself to bringing about a positive change in their lives.
Like you mentioned, you work a lot. You give your whole soul to your work. Do you ever get lonely?
Look, I never experienced loneliness because I am an ardent believer in the philosophy of 1+1. And this philosophy of 1+1 is aligned with my moral compass. And whenever I am asked to elaborate on this outlook, I say the first one represents Modi and the other one represents the Almighty. I am never alone, for He is always there to keep me company. This is just how I function. Having wholeheartedly embraced the ideals of Swami Vivekananda, I firmly believe that service to mankind is service to God. For me, the nation itself is divine, and mankind is a reflection of the divine. I walk this path with the conviction that serving the people is serving the divine. That's why the very notion of struggling with loneliness has never even remotely crossed my mind. Like at the time of pandemic, with the lockdown and traveling restrictions in place, I came up with a way to make the most of my time. I designed a governance model that operated seamlessly through video conferencing. I kept myself occupied with remote work and virtual meetings. Another thing I did was to connect with the people I had worked with throughout my life. Among my party's volunteers nationwide, I made a list of those who were 70 and older. Some of the volunteers had very humble beginnings and came from very modest backgrounds. I personally called every volunteer age 70 and above. I made it a point to inquire about their health and their family's well-being. I inquired about how their area was coping. I asked these questions to make sure they were doing well. This allowed me to build rapport with them, and we would go down the memory lane. They were touched that the Prime Minister would check on them in the pandemic. I made around 40 calls every day without fail. I carried on with this throughout the pandemic. It gave me the chance to reconnect and relive old memories with familiar faces. Loneliness is never a concern for me, as I always find ways to stay engaged. And I have long been at peace with myself. The time I spent in the Himalayas have helped me develop this.
I've heard from many people that you are the hardest worker they know. What's your philosophy behind that? Maybe you put in crazy hours every single day. Do you ever get tired? What what's your source of strength and perseverance through all of that?
Look, first of all, I don't believe I'm the only one working. I look at the people around me and always think, these people work harder than I do. When I think about farmers, I realize how hard they work. They toil and sweat under the open sky day after day. When I look at our country's soldiers, I think about how many hours someone spends working tirelessly in snow, deserts, or even underwater day and night. When I see a laborer, I think about how hard they're working. I always think about how hard our mothers and sisters work in every family for the happiness of the family. They're the first to wake up and the last to go to bed, taking care of everyone in the family. while also managing social responsibilities. Thinking of all this, I'm in awe of how hard people work. So I think, how can I sleep? How can I relax? So naturally, the motivation is right in front of my eyes. Those very things around me keep me motivated. Secondly, my responsibilities keep pushing me forward. The responsibilities entrusted to me by my fellow citizens always remind me that I'm not here to enjoy privileges. I will always give it my absolute best. Perhaps there are a couple of things I may not accomplish, but there will never be a lack of effort or hard work from me. And when I was campaigning in 2014, I had made a promise first in Gujarat and later across India. I promised my fellow citizens that I will never fall behind in hard work for my country. Secondly, I promised I would never act with bad intentions. And thirdly, I vowed I'd never do anything for personal gain. Today, it's been 24 years. For such a long period, the people have entrusted me as head of government. I've continuously held myself to these three standards, and I still live by them today. My inspiration comes from serving 1.4 billion people, from understanding and fulfilling their aspirations, and addressing their needs. I'm always determined to do as much as I can, work as hard as possible. Even today, my energy remains just as strong.
Me, as an engineer, as a person who loves mathematics, I have to ask. Srinivasa Ramanujan is an Indian mathematician. From a century ago, he's widely considered to be one of the greatest mathematicians of all time. Self-taught, grew up in poverty. You have often spoken about him. What do you find inspiring about him?
Look, I deeply respect him, and everyone in my country respects him as well. Because I strongly believe there's a deep connection between science and spirituality. If you closely observe many scientifically advanced minds, you'll find they're often spiritually advanced too. They're not disconnected from spirituality. Srinivasa Ramanujan once said that his mathematical ideas came from the goddess he worshipped, meaning ideas emerge from spiritual discipline. And discipline is more than just hard work. It means fully devoting yourself to a task and completely immersing yourself into it. So much that you become one with your work. You see, the more open we are to new and different sources of knowledge, the more new ideas we'll have. I think it's important for us to clearly understand the difference between information and knowledge. Some people mistakenly confuse information with knowledge, carrying around large amounts of information. But I don't believe information alone equals knowledge. Knowledge is something deeper. It gradually evolves through processing, reflection, and understanding. Recognizing this difference is important in how we handle both.
You have a reputation for being a decisive leader. So, can you walk me through on this topic of ideas, how you make decisions? What's your process? So, for instance, when facing a high stakes choice with no clear precedence, a lot of uncertainty, having to balance input, how do you make decisions?
There are many factors to my decision making. First, I'm perhaps the only politician in India who has stayed overnight in around 85 to 90% of the districts across the country. This was before my current role. I used to travel extensively. I learned a lot from those experiences. They gave me first-hand knowledge of the ground realities and grassroots level issues, not something asked or heard or learned merely from books. Secondly, from a governance perspective, I carry no baggage of any kind. I don't carry any baggage that weighs me down or forces me to act a certain way. Thirdly, I have a simple yardstick for decisions: my country first. I always question if what I'm doing harms my nation in any way. Additionally, Mahatma Gandhi once said that if you're ever unsure when making a decision, think of the poorest person's face, remember them, and ask yourself, will this help them? Then your decision will be right. That wisdom always guides me, remembering ordinary citizens and considering how my actions affect them. Another factor in my approach is that I'm very well connected. In my administration, my officials know this well and probably feel overwhelmed by it, by the fact that my information channels are numerous and are very active. Because of that, I receive lots of insights from various sources. So, when someone comes to brief me, that's not my only source of information. I always have additional perspectives available to me. Another thing, I maintain a learner's mindset. Suppose I'm not familiar with something and an official explains it to me. I approach them like a student and ask, can you clarify this? How does it work? Then what happens next and how? And whenever I have different information, I deliberately play devil's advocate and ask challenging questions. I thoroughly analyze the issue from multiple angles, hoping that careful evaluation will yield something valuable. Then, once I converge toward a decision or action that is worth taking, I share the idea informally with like-minded people just to gauge their reactions and see how they respond, gathering insights and feedback before moving forward. Until finally, I have a strong conviction that my decision is right. This entire decision-making process doesn't actually take much time. My speed is very fast. Let me share an example. How did I make decisions during COVID? I had Nobel Prize winners advising me, giving countless economic examples from around the world. They'd say, this country is doing this, that country did that, you should do it too. Renowned economists constantly bombarded me with suggestions. Political parties pressured me relentlessly, urging me to spend huge amounts of money. But I didn't act immediately. I paused and reflected. What exactly should I do? Then, considering the unique conditions of my own country, I made a clear decision. I wouldn't let the poor sleep hungry. I wouldn't allow social tensions to arise over basic daily needs. These core principles guided my approach. The entire world was in lockdown. Global economies were collapsing. Everyone pressured me to empty the treasury, print more currency, and flood money everywhere. But I decided that this was not the right economic route to follow. And so instead, the path I chose, after carefully listening to experts, understanding their opinions without opposing them, and combining their advice with my own country's situation and my personal experiences, created a system that worked effectively. As a result, when the whole world suffered from severe inflation immediately after COVID,